see you all. Thanks for braving the cold to come out. It's great to see you. And I trust that God's going to do something for you. I trust that just even as I was praying over this word, I really felt like God's heart was to strengthen, to encourage, to empower. And so I'm trusting that you're going to get something today of that you will be strengthened, that you're going to be encouraged and empowered. And for those that end up listening later, I'm trusting for the same thing. So I just encourage you even to open your hearts even now and let God speak in. It's a joy to speak this morning. Pete and Tess are getting some much needed time off and some rest. So please join me in praying for them this week, that God will continue to pour into them, that God's going to continue to pour vision and life and blessing and the right kind of rest into their souls as they rest. Well, it's a new year. We're a couple of weeks in now, and as you know, New Year is often a time that we reset. We examine, we take a step back, and we reset, and we look at where do we want to move forward. It's very much a time of optimism and a time of excitement. But in our city, if you haven't noticed, some of that optimism has been tempered a little bit. I would say that, growing up, one of the things I loved about Calgary is I would say that there's a fierce sense of optimism, a daring sense of optimism that has characterized the people in this city. It's one of the things that I admire the most about the people of this city and this city itself. But if you've been chatting to people and out there, you might notice that some of that optimism has been in short supply, and for good reason. What I've noticed in many cases is more of a sense of resignation, a sense of people putting their heads down, working hard, and hoping that things turn around. And maybe you're also in that place. I think there's lots of people in this room who share those kinds of experiences as well. I know we have a huge amount of people in this room that are business owners, and even for those that aren't, a lot of people that have been affected by the economy. You have to keep going fast, and you have to keep your toe up, which means you put a lot of pressure on your back leg, and your back leg begins to ache after a time, and you better not fall down, because if you do, you are stuck. It is so disheartening to be stuck and flailing around in the snow, and I would find, what I would do is try to pack the snow around me, because you need to push yourself up, but it's so soft, right? And so I would try to pack snow around me so I would have something hard to push up on and get back going. If I can tell you, there's nothing more disheartening than when you go to push up and your hand slips through the snow and you fall even deeper back, and you're just like, I'll just lay here the rest of the day. And I feel like that's very much the experience of a lot of people. Maybe they fell down, they went to push themselves up, and that thing that they pushed up on gave away on them. And that's an incredibly disheartening feeling. And that's, we tend to find those things out in difficult times. We don't necessarily, when everything's going well, we don't have to experience those things. But when times are a little more difficult, things are shaking, and you're looking for something to hold on to, you have to figure out if what you're holding on to is going to be solid or if that's shaking as well. You don't have the luxury of holding on to things that don't bring life. So how about you this morning? Have you discovered recently that you were holding on to something that was shaking? Maybe it was something you thought was solid. Have you tried to push yourself up and found that the ground crumbled beneath you and you actually pushed back instead of pushing off? Or maybe you went and tried to push yourself. You tried to go hard. You tried to run a race, and you found out that the nutrients that were in you were not enough to sustain you. I'll never forget, there was a time, this was quite a while ago, the church had an ultimate frisbee team. I had joined. I was a recent homeowner at the time, recently bought my home, and there was a ton of landscaping I had to do, and we had a big game on Sunday. This was plus 30 weather. This is the other side of the spectrum, and I had a bunch of landscaping in the front yard to do, so we finished at church, and it was on a Sunday. I was like, hey, I'm going to go home, I'm going to work with my brother, and then hopefully I can get what I need to get done, and we go to this frisbee game. So I go home and, I'm a bachelor at the time, so, I got McDonald's for us to eat. We're eating McDonald's all day. We're drinking beer. We're out there working on the yard in the hot weather. That's what we had all day. I go to this Frisbee game and I have nothing in the tank. I have never felt so lacking as in that Frisbee game. Actually, Pete came to that Frisbee game and our team was doing terribly. And he's like, sat us down mid-game. He's like, guys, we have to do better than this. This is terrible effort. I was like, you're right, we do. So I tried to muster up everything that I could in me. I'm like, we're going to do much better. This is going to be fun. I just had nothing in the tank. We finished the game. I threw up. I went home. I got heat stroke. I learned something about having the right nutrients for what you're trying to do. So maybe that's you. Maybe you went out and you ran a race and you found out you weren't filled with the thing that you needed to be filled with. And you know what? That can be a scary circumstance. I felt like God wanted to speak to us and to say, number one, that if that's you, he has not forgotten you. Number one. And number two, that's all part of the plan. It's not part of the plan for you to fail. I didn't hear that. Don't hear me wrong. But sometimes God in his grace allows us to see the things that we're holding on to that are not real and substantial. And he allows them to be seen for what they are. And that's part of the plan. So that can be scary, but I believe that it's a tremendous opportunity for the sons and daughters of the living God in this city, in this time. This is when the church should be standing up in confidence and declaring, we have something of hope, true hope. We have something of true stability, and we have something of true life. We are called to be in the world, but not of the world. So we're called to be in the same situations as people, experiencing the same things, but coming to different conclusions. And that's because we draw from a different source. But if we're going to do that, we need to ensure that we're drinking from the right source. As Paul says, we must not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So I believe there's a time to examine ourselves to say, what source are we drawing from? Is the source that you're drawing from leaving you full of life, hope, and vigor? Or have you found, like your neighbors, that you're in that place of quiet desperation? Pete spoke last week about how to live an empowered Christian life, and he spoke specifically about the power of clarity and the clarity of knowing your identity as a son or daughter. See, when you have that assurance of who you are, you drink from a different well. You can be living the same circumstances as those around you, and they can be discouraged and disheartened, and you can be bursting with life. Because you know that you're a son or daughter of the Most High. You know that there's a plan and a purpose. You know that the one who's behind it all has your best interest at heart. But I want to talk about another aspect of that empowered Christian life. I want to tilt the diamond and look at another part of that. And I want to talk about the joy of the Lord. If I had a title, I guess it would be The Joy of the Lord is Your Strength. Nehemiah 8:10 says, this is after a festival that they've had, and this is his instruction to the people. Go your way, eat the fat, and drink sweet wine, and send portions of them to those for whom nothing is prepared. For this day is holy to the Lord. And do not be grieved, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. I want to talk about that joy of the Lord today, about that thing that marks us, that empowers us, that strengthens us. If you don't feel like you have that joy of the Lord in you, I've got good news for you. It's not something that we just have to muster up. It's not a face that we just have to put on and pretend. It's not a religious exercise. It's something that happens in us as we get a hold of who God is in the midst of our circumstances. First point on the joy of the Lord is that the joy of the Lord is bigger than us. Generally we feel happy when things are going our way, and we feel not happy when things are not going our way, right? And those things can be incredibly fickle sometimes. You might have noticed. We get happy when our team is winning. We get sad when they're not. We're happy when we're recognized at work. We're happy when we can see a sense of progress in our lives. But our happiness can be fickle sometimes. And I think for many of us, even when things are going our way, you can be happy and still miss out on lasting and tangible joy. You ever been in that circumstance where everything's going your way, everything looks good, and yet you feel like there's something here that you're just looking for that's more? There's a lot of people that have that experience. There's a lot of people that work really hard, try to line things up in their lives, and don't figure that out until they get to the end of their lives. And I think many times it's because we become so focused on just getting through. People are focused on their career, on having kids, on their goals. And then they get towards the end of their life and they realize, I wish there was something of more substance and meaning, but I don't know what that was. And that could be a very difficult circumstance. I believe that we are hardwired to search for meaning. We are beings of meaning. We need to have meaning and purpose behind what we're doing. There's something about that brings not just a sense of quick happiness, but a long-lasting sense of joy. And if we don't discover that, I think we're left feeling kind of hungry on the inside. And so that's what I want to talk about, is what is that long-lasting, in-depth, resting sense of joy? If you have your Bible, turn with me to Habakkuk. If you know much about Habakkuk. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth about Habakkuk and where he's at. But Habakkuk's a prophet for the people of Israel. He lived in a much more tumultuous time than we did today. The country that he lived in was at the verge of coming apart at the seams. There was a lot of external pressure from other nations, specifically Babylon. If you know about Babylon, you know that they became a big, big problem for Israel specifically. So Babylon was becoming a very real problem for them. But one of the bigger issues was there was a lot of corruption inside the country that was beginning to tear the country apart. People selling each other out, people selling their country out. And it's at that time that he wrote this. The verse today is Habakkuk 3:17. So let me set the stage a little bit. Habakkuk is in the place of having a very real dialogue with God. And he's saying to God, God, how can you be present? How can you be real if all of this is happening to us? Where are you? And he actually has a very real dialogue with God. It's very interesting. God's words to him, I would not say are comforting. If you know the book, God's words to him is, don't worry, I'm preparing to judge you people, and I'm going to judge you by using the Babylonians to come and exert my judgment on you. Not incredibly encouraging circumstantially, but Habakkuk encounters God, and this is the conclusion that he comes to in 3 verse 17. He says, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and yields no fruit, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herds in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. There's that word again. He makes my feet like the deer, and he makes me tread on high places. God, the Lord, is my strength. You know, it's funny, I used to read this and think, man, you know, he goes through all this, and then he has this incredible resolve, this sense of will. No, I will praise the Lord. But I believe that there's a lot more going on than Habakkuk just putting on a brave face. I believe there's a lot more going on here than him just being pious and saying, no, this is the right thing to do, I'm going to do it. In fact, what we talked about, Habakkuk is having a very real discussion with God beforehand. He's bearing his soul. He's arguing with God. So I don't think that's what's happening here. What I think is happening here is Habakkuk comes face to face with God. And in the midst of so many people that are crooked, so many people that are going their own way, he encounters the true justice of God. He encounters the purpose of God. He encounters the presence of God. And he says to himself, this is the meaning that I've been searching for. In the midst of all these things that aren't going right, there is a constant. And the constant is the Lord, and the Lord is good. It's an incredible realization. He comes to the conclusion that there's more joy in the presence and the purpose of God than if everything else were to go his way. It's almost like he's saying, I'd rather have everything go wrong and be in your presence than have everything go right and be outside of your presence. Reminds me of that psalmist that wrote, better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. It's powerful. So what is that thing that Habakkuk encountered? What's that thing that he saw that changed his perspective so much? And to look at that, I want to look a little deeper into another prophet that lived right around the same time as Habakkuk. Habakkuk's verse gives us a really good example of somebody that encountered God from his perspective. You get if you read his book, all of his worry, all of his fear, he puts it all on the table. He argues with God. He encounters God, and he's changed. And you see it from his perspective, and it's beautiful. But what I want to do is turn and look at it from the other perspective, and that's from God's perspective. And to do that, we're going to look at Zephaniah. Zephaniah actually lived just 30 years prior to Habakkuk. So very much the same circumstances facing the nation. And we want to turn to Zephaniah 3:17. I'm going to be there in just a minute. So I just want to recap. The joy of the Lord is bigger than us. That's point number one. That's the thing that Habakkuk encountered. That's what he realized. What caused him to realize that? That's what we're going to look at too. And this point number two is that God rejoices over us. Or if you want the extended point, it's God's rejoicing over us gives us the ability to rejoice in him. Zephaniah 3:17 says, fear not, O Zion, let not your hands grow weak. There's that strength thing again. The Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you by his love. He will exalt over you with loud singing. Really got the drop in there, eh? And I want to tell you, if you're struggling with joy, this is a great verse to memorize and dwell on. This is God's perspective over us, and it's so beautiful. And I want to dig into that. Fear not, O Zion, let not your hands grow weak. The Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty one who will save you. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you by his love. He will exalt over you with loud singing. Zephaniah, as we discussed, is much in the same difficulty that Habakkuk is in. But his experience is that even in the midst of suffering, God is delighting and rejoicing over us. And if God is the source of truth, if God is the one that sees all things without bias, if God is the one who loves all people without bias, sometimes we think that God is mean. I think that sometimes God loves us more than we even love ourselves. We could be prone to self-destructive tendencies. And if we're really honest with ourselves and we step back and look at ourselves, we could be pretty honest about what those tendencies are. God is not prone to self-destructive tendencies. He's not prone to people-destructive tendencies. He always seeks the greater good. He always sees things impartially. He sees the full picture. We see a part of it. And so if this is God's attitude, if he's rejoicing over us, then we have to come to one of two conclusions. Either God's really mean and he loves our suffering, or God sees something that we don't. And I've learned over and over again in my life that God sees something that we don't. There's times I've had to bang my head against the wall. God's had to show me the hard way. But I've learned again and again that he sees the things that we don't, that he seeks my greater good, that his heart for me is always good, sometimes better than my heart is for myself. And it says that he delights over us. Have you ever had anybody delight over you? It's not a really common experience. I could probably count on one hand the amount of times that are etched into my memory. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's your spouse. Have you ever had anybody just rejoice in you, just celebrate who you are? Just say, man, I just celebrate you. I'm so thankful for you. Those are the kind of things that stick with you. It's funny, as I was preparing for this, I was remembering a time in my life, and it's an odd story. But stick with me and you'll understand it towards the end. And it's actually from a time when my sister died. If you don't know the full story, my little sister was diagnosed with a rare blood disease. It's called Fanconi anemia. And we found out from when she was at a young age that she had this illness, and we had managed this for years with transfusions, and the goal was eventually to get her to the place where she could be cured and healed. And the way that you do that is through a bone-marrow transplant. Very common procedure, especially for people that have bone cancer or something, leukemia, like that. But for people in her condition, it was an incredibly difficult procedure. So they actually said to us, when she first got the illness, yes, she needs a bone marrow transplant to be cured, but survival rates somewhere in the 20 to 30% range. So we actually decided, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to wait. We're going to treat. We're going to wait for the science to come along, and then we're going to do our best to go through with this. And we did. We actually raised money and brought her to Minneapolis, Minnesota, one of the top 3 research facilities in the world for that illness. Significantly higher chance of survival. People that knew how to deal with the disease, knew the intricacies, people who were well versed in that. And actually, when we went through the procedure, the chances were much higher, around 80%. But unfortunately, complications arose in the midst of that post-transplant. I won't go into all the details, but suffice to say that she was really struggling. And we could see that. And I remember we got the call. My parents were down there. Jay and I were here. Jay's my brother. Say, hey, you need to pack your bags and come down. Things are not looking the best. And so we got on a plane. We met my uncle. We had some extended family down there. He briefed us on, hey, this is where things are at, just so you know. She's going to look a lot more rough than you expected. And we got there and we saw her, and it was beautiful. She waved to us. She hadn't had the strength to even raise her arm for weeks at that point, but saw us and waved to us. It was beautiful. And, you go there, you're prepared, but when it happens, you're not prepared, right? I can't explain it. You know it's going to happen, but then it happens, and everybody's in shock. And we were staying, it's a university hospital, so we were staying in this cramped campus room together. A little 3-bedroom dorm kind of unit shared. kitchen and bathroom. And it's the day after, and we're all just kind of wandering around not knowing what to do. And there's a man from the Fanconi anemia group. So because this disease was so rare, there was a great community and a group, people that had children with the disease, had a very strong community. They had camps, and they pulled money for research, and it was a phenomenal group. And anyway, there was a man living in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who was part of this group. He had a daughter that also had Fanconi anemia, and he came to our little suite, and for whatever reason, picked me and said, "Hey, where do you want to go today? Let's get you out of here. Where do you want to go?" And I don't even know why he picked me. And I couldn't think of where to go. The only thing that I could think of is, I want to go to the gym. I want to go work out. So he says to me, "You want to go to a gym? I've got a gym for you. I've got the gym for you. We're going to go to the perfect gym." And so we get in the car. God bless this man, he was on a mission. So we drive downtown Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he takes me to this elite health center, top of an office tower kind of gym. When we get there, he's got a membership through his work. I can't get in because I don't have a membership. And so we're just, okay, what do we do now? Let's just go to another gym. And he's like, "No, we're not going to another gym. We're going to this gym." So we went through 3 levels of people. He talked to the front desk lady, talked to the front desk manager, eventually talked to the head manager. He would not take no for an answer. He's like, "We're going to this gym." And they let us in. And so, we got in, I worked out, got out of my head, it was wonderful. And it was perfect. And got in the car, driving back to our little suite. And I remember just chatting with him, and he was talking to me about, telling me how much he admired my parents and loved our family. And, it was a difficult time for me. Even beyond this, I was in Bible college 2 years in, but didn't really have a lot of direction in life, really trying to figure out, where am I going? What am I going to do with my life? I have no idea. And I remember him just saying, you're a really bright guy. I can tell you care a lot. I know you're going to figure it out. And I don't know what you're going to do, but I just know you're going to be successful at it. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like a small statement, but it just rocked me. So we got back, he dropped me off. I'll tell you what, that small act of kindness changed my life. It's one of those things, I still remember it today. It changed my life. And I returned, when I left that morning, I could barely figure out how to put one foot in front of the other. I don't know if you've ever been in that level of fog, where it's just like fog, confusion, you don't know what you're going to do. You're just kind of wandering around. But I returned feeling empowered, saying, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I know that I can. I don't know how I'm going to care for my family, but I know that I can. So I left scattered, I returned empowered. And as I was preparing today for this, I was remembering that story, and I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, God, why am I remembering that story in relation to what we're talking about? And God said to me, son, I was looking for an opportunity to speak into your life. I was rejoicing over you in that moment. If you thought what he said changed your life, if you had any idea what I was looking to speak to you. But you know what? Sometimes that's how we walk through life. I got a picture of, those racehorses. They have the blinders on, right? They can't see. And I really feel like I was involved in my own business. I was in my own head. I had my blinders on. And God was looking for an opportunity to speak into my heart. And the only opportunity that was open was this God to say a little thing. And God did it, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. But God said to me, imagine you took those blinders off. Imagine you opened your heart and turned it to me and said, God, what are you saying in this moment? And that's what I felt for today. That's what I wanted to encourage you to do. God knows everything about you. He knows your flaws. He knows your quirks. He knows your insecurities. He knows your fears. And God deeply loves and accepts you. He knows the things you're afraid to share with others. He knows the things that sometimes you're afraid to even acknowledge yourself. He knows that deeply. And yet, this is his experience. He rejoices over you. He is the most powerful being in the universe. And he actively rejoices over you. When your heart is skittish and you can't focus, his love actively quiets you. And when you don't see a lot of reason for optimism, he actively shouts over you with loud singing. You don't see a lot of hope? He's leading the procession in front of you. He's got the marching band. They're playing at full steam. He's dancing in the front row. He's shouting. That is the word that's used here. We don't really have an English word. He exalts over you with loud singing. It's kind of bulky. We can't touch it. It's exuberance. There's an exuberance. And that's what I felt like God wanted us to get a hold of today. I felt like God saying, it's time to lean in. It's time to take the blinders off. It's time to open your hearts and listen. It's time to not be conformed to this world. It's time to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. I can promise you that if we do, we're going to carry hope into people's lives in such a powerful and real way. And that's what God wants. Saul, if you want to come up. So I want to ask, how are you doing this morning? Are you feeling a little tired? Feeling like the thing that you tried to push off on gave way from under you? You feeling like the thing that you were holding on to was shaking, wasn't stable? You feel like the things that you've been consuming didn't give you the gas in the tank? I got great news for you. God is right there. He's got a well that doesn't run dry. His heart for you this morning is good. He wants to see you strengthened. Something in that word, strengthened. He wants to see health in your bones. He wants to see optimism and hope in your eyes. That's what he wants. I want to give an opportunity for us to respond. And I really felt like God was saying, just as the verses say, if you're feeling lack of joy, guess what? Great news. We don't have to muster it up. The answer isn't, come and be more joyful. The answer is, come and listen. There's one thing that I felt like God said, and it was check the condition of your hearts. There's one thing that he asks us to do, is to tend the soil of our hearts. How is the soil of your heart? Is it hard soil? Are you coming here saying, I know the drill, I know how this works. Every Sunday we come, we sing a few songs, we go home, I feel a little bit lighter. I know how this Jesus thing works. That's a hard heart. When we come expecting not to see God move, that's a hard heart. Maybe it's time to get out the hoe and shovel that up. Turn up that soil. Are you saying, initially God did some great things in my life and I saw some amazing things, but I just haven't seen anything like that in quite a while? rocky soil. Time to get out the shovel and pull up those rocks. It's time to let those roots go deep. It's time to lean on the word of the Lord and let those things establish over time. It's time to do that today and tomorrow and the next day. That's how you let the words go deep. Or maybe, and I feel like there's a lot of people in this place, you feel like the cares of the world are just choking you out. There's always something else to do. There's always another thing to worry about. There's always another thing that I have to respond to. There's always some fire that I feel like I have to put out. There's always some fear that's on the next hill and on the next horizon. It's time to get out the weed whacker. Those things are just crowding you out. They're choking out the life that God has planted in you. Tend the soil of your heart. Come and listen to the voice of the Lord and let his words go deep. And I promise you, you will see the kingdom of God established in and around your life. I'm not sure exactly where you're at today. I do want to give a chance for us to respond before we go home. Right now, no distractions, no kids, no worries, no business concerns. Before we leave, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to God. So I don't know what he's asking you to do today. If you need somebody to pray with you, I'm happy to pray with you. Derek, maybe you can come around. Derek's happy to pray with you. Krista. If you need to come and just make a physical show and just get on your knees in front of God, I want to encourage you to do that as well. But take a moment to respond. Maybe you just need to go back and worship and let God wash over you and just shake off the cares of the world, and go do that. But I'm going to give you a few minutes. Father God, we honor you today. God, we honor you for your goodness. We declare today that your heart is always good, that you always look for the best in us, that you always look for the best through us, God. God, today we open our hearts to you as sons and daughters, not just as servants, God, but as sons and daughters. Father, would you speak to us now? Would you reveal things to us now, God? Would you reveal the state of our hearts? Would you open our eyes? Would you open our ears to hear and see the things that you're doing and saying? We wait on you. In Jesus' name.